People ask me this all the time. They're like, "Matt, why don't you write for the Rolling Stone? Why don't you write for the Atlantic? Why don't you write for these other people?" I don't know if I really want to anymore. It's just that simple. Well, first off, let's get this straight. I just don't write my own stories, right? I don't do that. I go out, I find my own sources. I go out and I talk to my own people. I do my own photos, bullshit my way through my own video, whole nine yards. I don't sit well with being micromanaged at all. And I don't like this idea of being under somebody's thumb constantly, right? I'm a grown ass man. I'm 45 years old. I'm not some scared millennial, right? I'm a grown ass man. I can handle myself. And when you work a lot of times with these publications, it's almost like you're under somebody's thumb, you know? You take what you write the way you want to write it. They run it through the fact checkers as they should, and then they run it through the QA people, which is just another idea of being risk assessment, right? That's what it is, and that whole nine yards right there, that whole little world of risk assessment, the publications. There's an American term that they really love: risk averse. Business loves it. They love being risk averse. And that's where publishing has gone these days, is right into the being risk averse world. So, used to publishing was where the risk takers went, right? That's where the people who went and tried different things, wanted to do different things. They went there to be different. They went there to tell the stories that mattered, right? I mean, there probably wouldn't have been a Hunter Thompson without Rolling Stone, right? But there probably wouldn't have been a Rolling Stone very long without Hunter Thompson and without some of the leadership that they had back then. There probably wouldn't have been a Washington Post if they hadn't had a lot of this leadership that they had and some of the personalities that were very strong there. But I don't think society changed. Leadership changed. And that was a real problem. Leadership went from being this real risk taking budget if I get sued, budget if we get some kickback, tell the damn story. Uh, to being like, oh, what are we going to do? We don't want sued. We don't want so and so to think negatively of us. We don't want to lose this advertiser. We don't want to do this. We don't want to do that. And when you start refusing to take risk and you start refusing to give the writers their own voice and allow them the platform to do that, that's when you see that funnel of a decline. Most media today is pretty boring. It really is. I don't read magazines nearly as much as I used to. Probably a lot of people don't read magazines as much as they used to, right? Or they don't even read them online. They don't get the. I don't. I haven't. I used to be a pretty avid reader of Rolling Stone, Maxim, stuff like this, right? But now I hardly pick it up because it's just cars, cigars, a sponsored whiskey ad, turned into a story, a resort somewhere in the Maldives or something. I mean, God, anybody can write that shit. Anybody can write that bullshit. Very few people can write the way that we fucking write. And that takes a lot of guts to be able to write the way that we write. And when I say we, I mean the independent writers of the world who come out here, follow the stories, we let the chips fall come what may. And oftentimes we don't find a mainstream publication, and that's fine because that risk is what really tells the story. And if you want to know the death of America, it lies in the death of our publishing industry. People do not like to take chances. Americans these days do not like to take chances. And I'd say it's been this way since at least the early 2000s. And I know a lot of people would like to say that that's a side effect of 9/11, right? I don't think so. I don't think it's a side effect of 9/11. I think it's a side effect of society in general. People becoming scared of everything, of everything. You know, if you write something about a politician, he's gonna bitch and bellyache and throw a fit, and before you know it, you have, you know, fake warrants popping up everywhere. You have a bad PR press. You're getting threats of lawsuits that you're gonna have to defend against, and those things cost money to defend against, you know? And you know, you just end up it's a bunch of bullshit. If you say your opinion is under threat these days, your way of life is under threat, and they want to keep it under threat because they know if it's under threat, let me tell you something. The powerful in America are doing to the people exactly what Iran is doing in the Strait of Hormuz right now. A threat is just as good as an action. If you threaten to put mines in the Strait of Hormuz, that puts people on edge. If people are on edge, they're risk averse. They're not going to take a chance. I think Americans have a good reason to be scared, you know, because we live in such a litigious society that people will sue for any fucking thing. I mean, they'll sue you for anything. And that has especially become true in the news media today, where people, you know, they're like, well, did we say something negative that could be negative about so and so that he's going to deny? Or did we say something bad about this company? Or did we show a side of this town that somebody powerful in the town didn't like, or the Rotary Club didn't like, or whatever? Then they start belly aching, and I'm going to sue the living shit out of you. I'm going to sue you and your publication into oblivion. I'm going to have people boycott you. And the internet's a very powerful thing. But the internet is also a very weak and fragile thing, too, because he who goes on the internet nowadays is just becoming the biggest joke with an opinion or a bitch or a bellyache or a gripe, because I don't think people are taking them as serious as they once did. You know, if you read a complaint review and this one person is bellyaching about it, I'm not sure many people are really taking that seriously. I think the reason people don't take these things seriously is because they've seen it so many times. They're becoming numb to it, you know? People on social media are becoming more vicious. They're becoming more loud. They're becoming more obnoxious, more threatening. I mean, you know how many damn times I can go out somewhere and somebody will say, you know, hey, are you Matt? Yeah. You're a motherfucker piece of shit. I'm gonna whip you out. Well, you know, and you wanna, you know, you have to defend yourself, obviously, because you can't. You've already pissed off half the police department. They're not going to come to your rescue. So, you know, you have to defend yourself. You know, and these little kids, these little pansies that come out of these colleges writing, they don't want to have to deal with that. They're scared, man. They don't want to have to deal with that, and their publishers don't want them to deal with that. So that was kind of the down that giant sucking sound. You know, remember when Ross Perot said, "If you pass NAFTA, there's gonna be a giant sucking sound. Our jobs going south." You remember that? Well, that's kind of what happened to the media industry too. It's just been you threaten and threaten and threaten, risk, people will run. And that's, I think, what happened to the newspapers and the publishing and everything else, and to American society in general, is they got risk averse. You know, I think people became risk averse, like I said earlier, for good reason. You know, and it's not just publications. I mean, it's tech companies, it's manufacturers, it's your local coffee shop, because they don't want to be sued. You know, insurance rates are very high right now. Why are they high? Not because of the criminals, but because you can sue anybody for anything. And America has become an incredibly litigious society. And I think there should be some limits on that. Really, I do. I really do. And there's really not much penalty for anybody who brings forth a bullshit lawsuit and loses. There's not much penalty for that, right? It's just he who is accused is out the money for defending himself. Um, uh, it's a complicated riot, right? But I think when you begin to start peeling back the layers of the onion, that's when you really start to see the real truth of what's happening in America. So that's what I think. Yeah. And that's what I see. And that's what I've seen since at least the late 90s. it comes down to guts. Most publishers and most publications don't have guts. Dan Rather wrote, news and guts, you know? Uh, Maybe we still have the news, but we don't have the guts. And the guts are what's been torn out of the fabric of the American society, especially when it comes to the media and when it comes to the press and what we're doing. We need the freedom to write the stories that we want. And it's not just the right wingers doing it, it's the left wingers too. They're all guilty. I mean, you need to hire more LGBTQ people. You need to hire more good old white boys. You need to hire more skinny jeans boys. Whatever. They're all guilty of it. It's not partisan by any means, but it's real. It's not partisan, but it's real. So these days, I mainly publish on my website, mattpierceblog.com. I also publish a little bit with some publications on medium.com that I like, I'm really fond of. There's some great publications on medium.com. And if you're selective about it, you can pay a few bucks a month and then you can subscribe to some publications and you can get some members only stories. This is not a plug for medium.com at all because God knows I make maybe 10 bucks a month. On average, you probably make about $4 a month if you're lucky. So it's not really a lucrative place to write, but I write on medium.com. I don't do a lot of Substack. I do a little bit of Substack, but Substack's kind of a useless pit. There's no real discovery for me. See, as an independent journalist and as an independent writer, your problem is distribution and discovery, right? That's your problem. And that's where the big publications still kind of have an advantage is they have distribution, they have discovery to where things like Substack, Medium has a little bit internal discovery, but not much. But yeah, so mainly on my website, mattpierceblog.com, medium.com, and some of the publications, and occasionally some mainstream press. I'm not a huge fan of the mainstream press at all. Here in Texas, we used to have a digital first newspaper, the Texas Tribune. It used to be great. It used to be great. It was, check it out, by a New Yorker, was one of the big guys behind it, Evan Smith, who I really like and admire a lot. I think Evan is a wonderful human being. Ross Ramsey was there. You had some really powerhouse journalists with people who I think the average Texan related to. And now the Texas Tribune has gotten away from that a lot with people with names that you can't even pronounce, people you can't even relate to. That's another issue is being relatable to people and relatable to your core audience. And I think with the Texas Tribune, you've seen a shift in that core audience and it goes a long way. You have to be able to relate to people. And to be able to tell the stories the right way in an effective way, you have to be able to relate with people. And that being relatable is quickly going away. Quickly going away. On the note of being relatable, I think if you're talking to people and you're out there and you look like them and you talk like them and your haircut's like them, there's that mirror effect, right? In psychology, we call it mirroring. It goes a really long way with people. And I think that's why the things like the Texas Tribune, Rolling Stone, things like that for a very long time did great work and they did wonderful things because people could at least somewhat relate to them. Now it's just part of this gotcha media, and this culture of people with names that you can't pronounce, people that you can't relate with. The media has become its own worst enemy. And that goes for all of them conservative media, liberal media, and independent media. It goes for all of them. So, anyway, yeah. So my name's Matt. I'm an independent journalist, I'm a writer, and I kind of do things my own way. Please, I do a lot of research. I'm doing a lot more academic research these days. and doing some studying on the expressive spaces, which is directly related to this kind of my experiences working in the media. So, anyway, please feel free to subscribe, like, follow, share, comment, whatever you want to do, because I think these are legitimate conversations that need to be had in a raw, real sort of way.